What House Bill 444 does is provides for an additional tool for economic development, creates an additional economic development tool.
Another tool in the toolbox.
And for how many years?
Unlike the industrial tax exemption, which has a finite number of years, there's more flexibility provided for in the pilot agreement.
Could be 25 years. It could be for indefinite, huh? I mean, it could be for 50 years, it could be 5 years, it could be any period of time negotiated. Okay, so for 30-year, 20-year, 30-year, 40-year CA, then there's no reassessment process until that 30-year period is ended, right?
Sure, it could be 20 years, it could be 5, it could be 10 years.
They would not have the benefit of the reassessment values because of possibly inflation, because they've locked in a certain amount.
There's nothing specified in the bill. The ones I have seen have been, anywhere from 20 to 30 to 40 years. That's the most flexibility.
Typically 20, 30-year contracts, if you will, seems like an awful long time.
I'm Sheila Miller, president of the Cameron Parish School Board. This LNG plant in our parish is our survival. It gave us valuable dollars before, and we have maybe 5 to 7 other plants coming into our parish that would give us valuable dollars to support our budget. Right now we're running an $8 million deficit, and just with one LNG and one pilot program would have gave us $8 million. It would have covered our deficit. We can't close any more schools in our parish. We've gone from 7 schools to 4 schools in the parish, and those 4 schools are divided between a ship channel and the intercoastal canal. So there's no way that we can consolidate schools and bus our children that far. So there are doing good things in our parish, and we just want you to please give us an opportunity, give us the tools to enter into this pilot agreement and try to negotiate so we can have funds to help our students.
Mr. Chairman, Ryan Boryak. I'm the Cameron Parish Administrator. Hurricane Rita and Ike did a number on us, as it did many communities. For us, we negotiated a pilot that was a 67% increase in our ad valorem tax collection. We looked at it. We asked for guidance on the eventual numbers of the tax collections, and I think all of us know we just do not know. We cannot anticipate what those eventual values will be some 10 years down the road, much less next year. So for us, I have a 6 and a 4-year-old daughter. It's the 7th generation of my family that grew up on the same piece of property in Grand Chenier. We moved our family from Baton Rouge back to Grand Chenier to save our home. All we're asking for is a little assistance to help us get there.
Sheriff Ron Johnson, Cameron Parish. We're simply asking for permission to eat at our own table and invite the state to eat also. If all these LNGs and ports come in, we're going to have probably about 25,000 workers. I'm telling you, with my taxes, my workforce right now, I cannot do this. I cannot supply law enforcement needs. I can't supply them right now the way that we need to supply them, but we're getting by. I'm fixing to hire 2 more spots that I can't afford. And it's because the people need it for their protection. Law enforcement, school, this is vital for us. We can't wait 13 years for this construction and then this 10-year exemption to come into effect. We can't support infrastructure-wise this type of activity. We welcome it, but I can tell you, Chenier LNG and Cameron LNG has done plenty for Cameron Parish. They haven't just built their buildings. They've contributed much. Thank you so much.
All right. Up now we have the opponents. Gentlemen, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. I'm Broderick Baggert with Together Louisiana. I'd just like to start by reading some of the details on existing industrial tax exemptions for Cameron LNG and Cameron Parish, which may set the context for what we're really talking about here. There are 15 ITAP, industrial tax exemption contracts underway. The first was approved in 2003 for $126 million in property taxes exempt. That was the first of 15 The next two were fairly small, 16,000, 42,000. Excuse me. The next one was for $1 million and 400,000. Then 400,000, 133,000, 35,000. The next one, $2.19 billion in exempt property over a 10-year period. Now, that's not the investment. That's the exemption. It goes on, 82,000, 9 million, 9.9 million, 252,000, 30,000. The next one, $778 million of exempt property. The bill on that one is coming in 2026. The 2.1 billion, 2023. 2026, they'll also owe another 54 million and 14 million. When you have a 10-year tax exemption, the bill comes due. Now, often when it's just machinery, they'll throw out that machinery and replace it with something new and keep the ITEP rolling. But some things are too big to throw out, like the whole plant, right? When you're going to have to start paying on the whole plant, and you've got a $20 billion investment, okay, and you're going to owe $1 billion in taxes, here's one option. Go to your friendly school board, your friendly sheriff, your friendly police jury, and say, how about we make an arrangement here? How about we pay you $4 million for the next 2 years? And then after that, we're going to pay you $24 million. Now, how much a thing is a relative thing based on what you compare it to. And when you're going to have $200 million coming to you, then getting $24 million by contract ain't a lot, it's a little. This is a very small parish. I haven't looked at their campaign finance reports, but I am sure there's not that much money going into these local elections. What the Cameron Parish Police Jury did in agreeing to $4 million a year for 2 years and then $24 million for subsequent years was to give away the farm. It was to give away hundreds of millions of tax money that would be coming. And the fact that those public bodies were set to get that tax money was the only reason they approached the police jury to enter into that agreement. It's the only reason why they've hired this army of lobbyists behind me to push for this bill. It's the only reason this bill exists, because a lawsuit was filed. The court said, look, our Constitution provides for what exemptions are legal. It says a homestead exemption is legal. It says if you're a nonprofit or a church, an exemption is legal. It says an industrial tax exemption under certain circumstances are legal. It doesn't say whatever you guys have worked out locally is legal. It was declared unconstitutional right off the bat. What this does is to come say, well, we lost. How about we change the Constitution in order to adapt the Constitution to our interest in saving money? Now, if this were just about Cameron Parish, that'd be one thing. But to open this up, where any public body could have any local agreement be a valid exemption, will wreak more havoc than anything being decided now or in the last 20 years. Here's why. You don't have to have a perpetually corrupt government. You have to win one election cycle. You win one election cycle. You can enter into an agreement with no limit to its time frame. You heard that, right? 30 years, 40 years. Why not 100 years? Why not 5,000 years? And no election subsequent to that can deal with it. It is a binding contract. HB444 will give it constitutional authority, and they will owe what the people who they elected that one time, however many years ago, have set in place. We think that is a bad piece of legislation. We think all this talk about how this is going to be getting public bodies money is either confusion or subterfuge. That's why this constitutional amendment is under the section of the Constitution providing for exemptions, not for new revenue, but for exemptions from revenue. And it's one that has the capacity to devastate our localities. We hope you oppose it and stop what is one of the worst pieces of legislation we've seen. Thank you.
Whenever you're ready.
Senator, my name is Frederick Skelton. I'm not a lobbyist or an attorney. I'm 75 years old. I'm a retiree. I came here today because I'm concerned about this legislation, and the reason I'm concerned about it is because my house didn't flood. I live in Baton Rouge, but I got a great friend who did. His wife died 2 years ago. My neighbors and I went over to his house to help him with the sheetrock, and about half an hour after we were there, we heard him kind of groan. He had opened up a cabinet and found his wedding album. And he was sitting on the floor and he was crying. All those pictures were ruined. There's some things in your life that you always remember. I can remember holding my granddaughter for the first time. I can remember when I got the phone call that my mother had passed away. And seeing Richard sit on that floor with his daughter with her arm around him, looking at those, what they could of those pictures, will stay with me forever. I later found out that the reason Richard's house flooded was because there was a drainage ditch behind the house, and it had clogged up. He didn't live near the river. He didn't live near a big body of water. It had just backed up. Our parish has said we've got problems with drainage, but they don't have the money to pay for them. From John Q. Citizen's viewpoint, the industrial tax exemption changes this year, where a local governing authority could say, no, we don't want to give all of that tax exemption. We want to give only a portion of it because we've got a need. Makes some sense to me. I know I got to pay taxes. I don't like it, but I got to pay my fair share. But I think if a governing authority were to say to someone who would apply for an industrial tax exemption, no, you can't get 10 million, you can only get 9 million this year because we need 1 million to fix some things, it would make some sense to me. And if it has to be renewed every 5 years, that makes some sense to me. Because things change. I understand some company might go out of business, but they also might get more valuable and they might be having to owe more taxes, or there might be, the problem might be overcome, or there might be a new problem. But 5 years makes some sense to me. From a John Q. Citizen's viewpoint, some parish entering into an agreement for 30 years stinks. It just doesn't make any sense from a common sense viewpoint, not to the lobbyists. I understand they like it, and not to the attorneys, but for me and my friend Richard, I don't think you should pass this. Thank you.
Senator, I indicated on my card I did wish to speak. I'm
Go right ahead. Sorry.
I'm Ann Dunn, and I'm here with Together Louisiana, and I'll be brief. In reading this legislation and some of the discussion in favor of the bill, you have the impression that there are requirements that give limitations, and there really are very few in here. The property that is subject to this kind of an agreement, according to the bill, is the property of a new manufacturing establishment or an addition to an existing one. And that's the same kind of property that fits under the industrial tax exemption. But this bill doesn't contain any of the limitations on producing jobs, on length of term, how this relates to the total tax bill. There's nothing that says the agreement has to assure the local government that they're going to get at least the equivalent of what they would have gotten had they been subject to normal procedures that are now in place. The one that really scares me is the next one, where it says other property subject to a cooperative endeavor agreement which has been approved by a committee of the legislature as provided by law. Now, the bill that accompanies this talks about the agreement guaranteeing that the benefit to the public body is 20 times that to the property owner, which could vary a lot depending on what other this kind of property, which there's no limitation on, or 250 new jobs. Doesn't say permanent jobs, just says new jobs. Often these projects have a number of construction jobs and then virtually no permanent jobs. So it's not really that much. Historically, the Louisiana Constitution has had some very specific limits on property exemptions. And this other property, subject to an agreement approved by a committee of the legislature as provided by law, basically just shoots a hole all the way through that provision of the Constitution that deals with property exemptions. I think it's not a good bill. I think it's not a good idea to pass this in its form.
Senator Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we have any more cards? No. Okay, and I want to thank you. That was pretty powerful. What's your name? Mr. Baggert? I just want to move to defer this bill. That was a very powerful testimony, by the way.
Thank you.
And I watched the reaction from everybody behind you. I was waiting for a lot of this. Oh, no, that's not right. Oh, he's wrong. He's absolutely, you kind of like Jay Luno's a good lawyer. You kind of watch when you're talking to your juror and all that stuff, and you wait for people to react. This is what it looked like. Deer in headlight, like boom, pants down, caught. Like much of what I'm saying is, I'm not saying like you guys are trying to undermine or anything like that, but it's like the truth about what the bill is doing. I think you captured.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and committee. I'll be very, very brief. My name is
I see you got a giant piece of paper in front of you, so if you're about to read to us.
No, I'm not.
Just giving you the heads up. There you go. Thank you, Mr. You made my day. Made my day.
Engaged with Together Louisiana. I've been coming here 4 years. And every year I've been here, I see where we give businesses exemptions. And I'm so tired of hearing about the toolbox for economic development for business. Where's the toolbox for the average citizen? What do we have? We can't even pass a minimum wage in this legislature to take care of the average citizen, but we still give billions of dollars away to businesses. It should stop. And this tool in the toolbox, tell you what my vision is, and this is my last statement. It's a screwdriver. And guess who's being screwed? Thank you.
There's a motion on the floor to defer the bill. Senator Smith, Gary Smith indicated he'd like to offer a substitute motion to report favorably. The vote will be on the substitute motion to report favorably. So if you indicate yes, you are indicating to report the bill favorably. Ms. Simpson, please take the roll.
Senator Boudreaux? No. No. Senator Carter? No. No. Senator Lambert?
Yes.
Yes. Senator Leno?
Yes.
Yes. Senator Peterson?
No.
No. Senator Reiser?
Yes.
Yes. Senator Gary Smith?
Yes.
Yes. Senator John Smith?
Yes.
Yes. Senator Erding?
No.
No. 5 yeas, 4 nays.
The chair votes no.
5 yeas and 5 nays.
So the motion to defer, Mr. Chairman?
So the bill's deferred.
Bill is deferred.
Bill's deferred. We have the companion bill, House Bill 445. Do you wish to hear that?
We would actually like to voluntarily defer that
Okay,
bill, please.
that's fine.
Voluntarily?
Yes, you can voluntarily defer that bill. All right.